Good morning, all you live streamers out there. This is
Live streamers.
the work session for July 9th, 2019, Thurston County Commissioners. And Commissioner Hutchings will be missing today. He's taking care of some other business. I'm Gary Edwards, Vice Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. And Ty?
Ty Mentzer, Commissioner District 3.
Robin, do you have a mic?
Labanita Bomar, Clerk of the Board.
Or Labanita. Go ahead.
Ramiro Chavez, County Manager.
Hi, I'm Labanita's twin, Robin Campbell, Assistant County Manager.
It's going to be one of those days.
Vicki Larkin, Commissioner Edwards' office.
Thank you. Okay.
You have a couple on the bench.
Well, I was already told I didn't have to do that because they're not on camera.
Oh, they're not on camera?
Not
I thought
on
you were-
camera.
No?
Nor are fellow folks in the audience, so. Okay. We will be working off of our agenda items for Tuesday, July 9th, 2019. Starting at 2 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. We are going to have a public hearing at 3 after our regular meeting. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Commissioner Mentzer, and we will then approve the minutes and the agenda. And then we'll have the opportunity for the public to address the board. We'll have a county manager's update. You have anything you want to comment on that,
yeah.
sir?
Yeah, Commissioner. I will highlight the received 4 letters from the Department of Ecology, 3 of which are given the Thurston County Public Works Award of Excellence to managing the 3 sewer utilities that we manage. One is Tamashan, the other one Boston Harbor, and the other one is Beverly Beach. And the 3rd letter, we received a permit for the stormwater permit that will allow us to operate under the purview of the county regulations. And I will give a little bit of a background this afternoon as to what that really entails. And I really don't have any citizens' comments to follow up this afternoon.
Okay. How about consent items A through H?
Yeah, item 3A, Commissioners, this is a proposal before you to authorize the Treasurer's Office to enter into a private negotiation to surplus a property located off of Bayview Drive, that is in the Boston Harbor area, just north of Burfoot Park. As a matter of background for the viewing audience, the private negotiations is at the end of a process where a property who falls delinquent in paying their property taxes becomes a tax title property, which the county doesn't own the property, it just holds in custody. The next step in the process is we have to advertise the surplus of those properties. And a lot of times those properties are not adequate for any building activities, and there's small in size. So in this particular case, in the next 3 items, I believe, those properties have already gone through the surplus process, the bidding process, where did not receive any potential bidders. So this particular item, the item 3A, this property is just about 0.08 acres. And the sale price is $1,000 plus the applicable fees for a total of $1,212.50.
Okay, I'd just like to point out to the public so they know this, that our county treasurer has taken this on as a way to get properties back on the tax rolls instead of sitting in limbo forever. And this is just one example of that good work. Do you have any questions, sir?
No.
Okay, how about B?
Yeah, similar case. This property is located off of Center Street in the town of Rainier. The size of this property is 0.07 acres. The sale price is $1,000 plus applicable fees, which is $1,211.50. And this will be private negotiations with Mr. Jeffrey Kildall.
Any questions?
Nope, looked these over last week.
Go ahead.
Item 3C is the third property for your consideration. And this is located off of State Route 507. Just before you go into town of Rainier, between the Johnson Creek Road and the Vale Cutoff Road. This property is 1.21 acres. It's a little bit larger than the other ones. But as you may recall, and I have a maps in here to refresh your memory, there's a knot-shaped property that even if you put all the needed setbacks, is not a buildable property. As a result, we didn't receive any bids when we tried to surplus this property. The sale price of this, sale price agreed with Mr. Russell Carpenter, is for $3,700 plus applicable fees for a total of $3,912.50.
Just because that is a little larger property, I just want to clarify that it's still not usable without connecting to adjoining property.
Right, and even the setbacks are difficult to even build a property there because it's
Okay.
an elongated property.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay. Okay. D.
Item 3D, you also reviewed this item last week for your consideration, is reclassification of a position in the Human Resources Department from a Human Resources Assistant to a Senior Office Assistant. And this is an effort as a result of Maria being promoted to as the director of the department. She has gone through and start assessing what the needs are in the department and start aligning all the different positions to address the business needs. And this is the case of this. The salary for this change will go, the top salary will go from $5,006 a month to $4,541 a month. That will be a reduction of $465 a month or 10%.
Any questions, sir?
No, sir.
E.
Yeah, this is for your consideration. Two items on this is related to the Stormwater and Advisory Board. You have a couple of weeks discussing how you can probably appoint, I think it's Jacqueline Simmons, to the Stormwater Advisory Board. Mr. Simmons lives in District Number 1, but we didn't have a vacancy in District Number 1. So we approached the chair of the Stormwater Advisory Board. So this action is for you to consider reappointing Ms. Phyllis Farrell from District 1, from at-large to District 1. I have the reverse on this, I'm sorry. From at-large to District 1. And Ms. Jacqueline Simmons, she applied for at-large, it will be appointed as an at-large representative. Her appointment will be from July 9, 2019 to July 9, 2022. And the appointment for Ms. Phyllis Farrell will not change, which expires on October 18, 2019.
Commissioner, any questions? Good?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. F.
This is also for your consideration, an appointment to the citizens' salary for elected officials. And this is an appointment for Mr. John Christensen for District 3, and the term will be ending in March 31st, 2023. You reviewed this item last week, and this appointment was the result of a lottery, not a lot, a lottery conducted by the auditor. And those applications don't come to you for your review as any other committee applicants, because those individuals in this committee set the salaries for the county commissioners. And I think it's a good approach to have a lottery-based selection So it creates a separation from your decision-making process. So avoids the appearance of influence.
So in the end, what happens here is we end up appointing somebody and voting on that appointment that we really don't know. And that is what gives us that separation when they make a determination on salary issues. I'll take a little plug as the chair's prerogative that I have in the past always felt that any elected official should know what their salary was when they signed up for it, and no incumbent should ever get a raise. I've not been successful, so I've went to the board, the salary commission in the past, and I get overruled. So just to let you know that we don't have any say about what goes on with that salary commission. I just use that as an example. Yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner. There is two aspects of the functions of the Salary Commission, which they set the salaries for all the elected officials in the county. They set the salaries of all the elected officials aside from the Board of County Commissioners, and those recommendations are come to you on a yearly basis. And you do have an option to reject, adjust, or agree with those recommendations. But also the Salary Commission provides recommendations to adjust the salaries of the county commissioners. In that case, you do not have an option to reject, change, or affirm. You just have the option to affirm it.
Yes, and therein lies the problem.
So that is a little bit of difference between.
We have the option of cutting somebody else's salary, but we can't cut our own, or accept, I guess. So, interesting process. Commissioner, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Item 3G is an appointment of Ms. Michelle Horney, to the Area Agency of Aging. I believe you reviewed this application, and the board concurred in appointing her, and this is a formal action. Her term will be from July 9th, 2019 to December 31st, 2019.
Just for the benefit of the viewing club, oh, go ahead.
Is that appointment correct?
It is, and she's filling an unexpired term, and she can be reappointed for her new term to be.
So might as well do it all official. Introduce yourself.
La Bonita Bomar, Clerk of the Board. This issue is that she is filling an unexpired term. So her term will end at the end of the year, and we may reappoint her if the Board of County Commissioners so chooses for a full term. But it has to be done separately.
As a separate appointment. Mm-hmm. And as we move forward with these appointments, we end up in a situation where we have all these boards and commissions, and we generally get feedback from those groups as to if the person applying does meet the criteria and no conflicts of interest and that type of thing. And then we move on from there. And that is how this appointment is coming about. And it'll be official after today. Sir?
I understand, good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll have the auditors, Darren's report.
Yeah, this is your weekly
how much money.
voucher list.
Department items.
Item 4, this is for your consideration, is to authorize the Director of Public Health and Social Services to sign an agreement with the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, the Developmental Disabilities Administration, for the amount of $5,415,134. As you may recall, maybe 2 weeks ago, you authorized the expenditures by allocating those funds to specific programs. So these programs, what it does is addresses the needs and provides assistance to individuals with the developmental disabilities, which includes high school transition, community information and education activities, provide training, employment, and community inclusion. High school transition services provide opportunities for exploration of vocational interest, facilitating connections with adult services, and working towards a job attainment upon graduation. That is the gist of this program. And again, this is accepting the revenue from the state to fund those programs on the upcoming year. And this agreement goes from July 1st, 2019 through June 20th, 2020.
Jennifer, do you have anything to add to that? Just give me a yes or a no, thumbs up, down, no, you're good? And we'll hear from the public health folks at our 2 o'clock meeting. Commissioner, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so.
Community planning and economic development.
You also had a review this item in addition to last week. You had a briefing from your Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. And this is related to the State Department of Corrections want to redevelop the the juvenile facility down in the Grand Mound area. And at this point, the proposal before you is to accept the grants to provide to support the activities the department will go through to accommodate the request in terms of the special use permit. This is for $82,875, and again, as you may recall, we had a great discussion last week where this really is not, this agreement doesn't bind the county nor the commissioners to accept any expected outcome of the applicant. This is just allows for the applicant to compensate county staff to expedite the request. Again, in this case, is the request to issue a special use permit to the Department of Corrections. And at this point, we really don't know what their plans are. As you may recall, the conversation. And this has been a project that has been in the works for at least for the last, I'll say probably 2 years, or at least. And this is related to, the state puts some money and then doesn't put some money. At this point, they do have some money to continue with the development of this particular project. And again, this item before you is just to accept the money for staff to work on this.
And I might point out for those folks that live in the Rochester area, Grand Mound area where this is located, there will be plenty of notice about public hearings and such that will be available to you to follow as a community as to what's going to go on in your neighborhood. Central services. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner, did you have
I just wanted to outline that we discussed the capacity of staff issue last week, and this item, if I recall correctly, was specifically we maintained this item on our docket for this eventuality of having this come through. So it's been planned for in terms of, because I know the public's heard a lot about staffing capacity and how we organize our priorities, and this was something that we kept on our list. So it's
been on for a number of years.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of the timing.
Yeah, good point, Commissioner, because, and again, the last 2 years has been on and off in terms of the activities, but I think the commission took this as just in case this becomes a reality again, to keep it on the development code docket, which is part of their scope of work.
So I guess I'll just say more to come as time goes on.
It certainly is more to come, because as a result of the public outreach, before any recommendation comes before you, it has to go through a due process, which involves a lot of engagement with the public and the stakeholders. So more to come on that. This is just the first step.
Okay, central services.
Also, you also review this item last week, and for your consideration, is to extend the term of the on-call contracts for design and engineering services that we utilize for all the buildings when we need a specific work. As an example of that is we utilized those consultants when we had the power outage, and you saw the construction that we had here on campus, is when we don't need to go through a formal RFP, so we have an on-call pool of consultants that we can draw into that. So this request doesn't increase the dollar amount. It's just a request to extend the current contracts to December 31st, 2021.
And doesn't this boil down to, by having this ability, we don't have to have on staff individual experts in so many different fields. We can go out and contract that information, that work out with individuals.
Right, because the needs of the buildings and facilities sometimes require a specific set of skills, and sometimes we don't have those set of skills available in county staff. And having those on-call consultants will allow us, on this approach, will allow us a quick and easy access to those services without having to go with a request for proposals every time that we need some of those services.
And it looks like this will be an official presentation by Monica later on
Yep.
in the day.
She will give you additional background, but
Okay.
if you have any questions, she's available to answer right now.
Is there a limit to these extensions before we have to go back and do an RFP process?
From my perspective, this will be probably the last extension that's allowed in the current contract. And it's more of a judgment call at this point. Before it expires, then we need to refresh with a new request for proposals, because we don't want to put ourselves in the position to continue to have the same extensions with the same consultants without giving any other consultants the opportunity to participate in the county business. So this probably will be the last extension, and before this expires, then I'm looking at the new head honcho of that business, Robin Campbell. Then she will process a new request for proposals to refresh the on-call services.
Okay.
Okay, how about emergency services?
You also review this item, and this is for your consideration to get into a maintenance and replacement agreement with a company named Stryker for a total of cost of $177,745.66 for a period of 6 years. And the maintenance and replacement is related to all the gurneys that we utilize in all the Medic 1 units, as well as in all the emergency services related specifically to the gurneys. This is has been approved by the Emergency Management Council, right? Yep. And as anything else, I think we just need to maintain the equipment that we have, and this contract allows us to keep the maintenance of those, what I call very expensive gurneys.
Maybe we can get Kurt to come up and introduce yourself, just a quick explanation.
Kurt Harden, Director of Emergency Services. So this preventive maintenance contract, we purchased these gurneys last year. The one-year warranty is expiring this summer. What this will do is continue the maintenance of these gurneys, and there's 15 gurneys that were acquired by Medic 1, and so therefore this is a 5-year contract that will go forward and continue maintenance and parts for the gurneys.
Is there any chance, just so the public can hear this, maybe the reason the cost is so high, because it is a fair amount of money, people when they think of gurneys think of just, hauling somebody into the ambulance or such, but there's a lot of reasons that we've got this.
So these gurneys were acquired last year. The gurneys are what we call power gurneys. They replaced our manual gurneys. We were having a number of L&I claims for back injuries for paramedics, and so we did the cost analysis and determined that on an average, saving one L&I claim per year would cover the cost of the gurney, because L&I claims can run upwards of $50,000. So based on that, these power gurneys, because we are a growing population, and I don't mean height-wise, We have challenges with paramedics having to lift the manual gurneys up into the medic units. And so these power gurneys will raise a patient off the ground and put them into the back of the medic unit, so we're saving on back injuries and L9 claims. And so those gurneys are approximately $40,000 each. And so as an acquisition, the reason this is $177,000 over 5 years is because of the cost of those gurneys and the parts that go with them. They're a hydraulic system. Then there's two parts to this system. There's the gurney itself, which is power, and then there's a system inside the medic unit which pulls the gurney in.
Okay, I think that's a pretty good explanation. Commissioners, do you have any issues on that?
I don't think so.
I just think it's such a large amount of money that people
Yeah.
don't understand.
I appreciate that clarification.
Do
'cause
Yes, sir.
we
you
didn't talk
mention
about
how
that
much
last
we
week.
purchase, the cost of one?
One gurney is just a little under $40,000,
So
and we purchased 15 of them.
that puts it in perspective of how much we need to
Right.
spend on.
And I don't want to try to do public math to get you the total number of the cost of the gurneys in my head. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. And we have the county manager's report.
This item for your consideration is to consider approving the second amendment to the interlocal agreement between Thurston County and the Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Organization. I walked you through this agreement last week as to the purpose and intent is changing the name and allows the Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Organization to evolve into the new system that is going to be taking in place in 2020. But I think I'd like to invite Mark just to give you a broader perspective. And I believe Commissioner Menser and Commissioner Hutchins, who serve as part of the Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Organization Board, may have a background on this as well.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mark Freeman, Thurston Mason, BHO. The discussion regarding the Second Amendment to the ILA, the interlocal agreement between Thurston and Mason County, is what created the existence of the Behavioral Health Organization. So the first ILA, or the initial version of it, was in September 2015. That created the BHO. We're amending this now because due to Senate Bill 5432, this current past year here, the BHOs will no longer exist, and the conversion is to what's called administrative service organizations. So the major part of that change is the BHOs had been managing Medicaid funding for all of our service providers in the community for both mental health and substance use. That changes. That Medicaid funding goes over to the private managed care companies that are now in contract with the state's health care authority. What remains for us to function under is the non-Medicaid contracts and block grant contracts that we will continue to manage the crisis system and other services in the community as of 2020. So this is a rather large shift in policy, change in our budget, and function, and change in, again, the agreement with Mason County that forms the ILA.
In your new name, if this amendment is approved, it goes from the Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Organization to Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization. That will be a new acronym, the TMBHASO.
I'm trying not to sound out that acronym. It just doesn't sound right, but yes. The other part of this agreement is forming a new entity that's under the conditions of the ASO, which is what's called the Olympic Health and Recovery Services. It's a licensed agency to provide both mental health and will provide substance use services. It currently exists. It's allowed under RCW, so the BHO is able to form it. We need to clearly set up this entity and have it recognized as being distinct from the ASO because, again, due to Senate Bill 5432, the two entities need to exist without there being essentially an unfair advantage to the Olympic Health and Recovery for contracts that the ASO might award. They can award crisis service contracts, and that's what we will be operating under. So services like we provide now for the designated crisis responders, we will continue to operate under this new entity, OHRS.
The state is kind of backing out of mental health treatment and whatnot, going to kind of regional community treatment. Is this part of that process that's taking place?
You're asking me to speak for the state, which
Well-
that might be, I might have a little conflict of interest. The primary reasons that they state, there's one is they are privatizing the system. They're moving from contracting with counties to contracting with private entities, for-profit entities, the purpose of which is to integrate Medicaid services for both physical health care and behavioral health care. Up to now, behavioral health had been what's called the carve-out funding of Medicaid from the federal government Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. What the state is doing is getting rid of the carve-out, carving in the funding so the managed care organizations that now operate physical health care under Apple Health will also have the behavioral health dollars to combine the two, ostensibly to get rid of gaps in services, improve care, improve outcome measures. So far, what has happened, and the only thing we have seen, and then again, this is my editorial, but it's based on fact, that we've seen fiscal integration. Money has been combined, and come 2020, will be combined in this region, but we haven't yet really seen clinical integration, which is what this whole thing is hoping for, to improve clinical outcomes for client care. It does reduce local government involvement in behavioral health care, and it reduces the local voice as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Commissioner, do you have anything to add to this?
Sure. Mark, I understand that this transition has happened in like King and Pierce and Eastern Washington already.
Correct.
And is what they're experiencing tell us anything about what maybe we're going to face? Any lessons learned about what's going on in those places?
Yes and no. We did wait to be what's called an on-time adopter, waiting for the mistakes and sort of the dust to clear, waiting for other regions who wanted to go earlier, and we're kind of happy we did. The state has learned in terms of management of the contracts and management of the transition of these services, things that mistakes we won't have to step into in the future. The other regions have gone and have integrated already. Right now, the first year, really there are 5 managed care companies that are involved in this, that are already under contract with Healthcare Authority. They're sort of obligated to maintain the first year of services as contracted now with us. So we really haven't seen what happens after that first year, where that requirement is off the books, if you will. So I know the providers are concerned that after the first year, how much they're getting paid and how they get paid, that'll change. And they're not sure what it'll change to. We have worked, we being the BHO and the counties, have worked real hard to make sure the service providers survive. When there are problems, when there need for startup funding to create new services, we helped this happen. We built a system of care that we're actually quite proud of, that we have in Thurston and Mason County. We will no longer be in the picture to help the providers with these issues, startup, even issues with management of cash flow. We know in Pierce County, listening to one of the managed care companies say that they're already doing about a 20% denial to the providers right up front for services due to errors in data and other issues that come up. So the providers are going to have to manage a cash flow of a couple of months out to be able to handle these initial denials. That is something that we were able to work with the providers and use our reserves and other things to help them manage the data. We're not sure what the future is going to look like then for the providers once we're out of the picture. That was probably more than you wanted to hear.
No,
but-
well, no, that's good. I mean, Jason this morning at the Innovate Just meeting was talking about the claim, the difference in sort of claims-based reimbursement.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about.
That's correct.
And you put a number on it, about 20% denial rate, which was something that we didn't necessarily have to, well, we were managing it more
We help the providers manage that, yes.
because we have that local connection and stuff. So,
Well, we wanted the providers to succeed.
right.
Without them, we don't have a system. We hope that that concern continues, but we can't guarantee it.
And there's a lot of concern about people, these organizations are not going to necessarily be in Washington State. Jason talked about being on the phone with folks in Arizona or California, and there's,
Well, these are all national companies
Yeah.
that exist outside of the region. A little minor editorial also is that a for-profit agency providing these managed care organizations are able to take profit. Us as a government entity or even a nonprofit, if we were, cannot make a profit off of Medicaid services. So one of the things that the system is supporting is that the state has put a limit on how much profit the managed care organizations can make, but they are making a profit, and because their headquarters lie outside of the state, that money is also leaving the state. So they're able to take an administrative cost plus a profit on top of it. We've worked real hard to keep our administrative costs, in the 3% region. We'll wait and see where things go, because the managed care companies can bump up to 10% on their administrative costs even before the profit.
I wanted to ask about when Commissioner Edwards at the beginning of his questions talked about kind of what the state was trying to accomplish with some of its changes, a little bit off topic maybe of the ILA, but since we've got you here, I just wanted to ask about, I was trying to sort through all the bills that got passed and what it means for our local, and especially with our triage center. Did anything happen in terms of the legislative session that will help us kind of use our triage center the way we originally intended? I know there's been, because of the lack of long-term beds, we were basically not able to use the triage center in the way it was originally intended. And is there anything that's helping us? Did anything happen that will help us change that, or what's the path forward there?
I would say the opposite, actually. The intent, the governor's plan is by 2023 to empty out the civil wards at Western State Hospital and provide the service in the community. That means the long-term stay individuals that are very hard to treat in the community will be moving out into the community. Now, there is some capital funding being provided for construction of facilities. Up to now, we being the BHO in the county, have built a couple of facilities like the triage facility. We will no longer be in position to do that. We're already struggling with bed capacity because we're unable to move people out to Western. So we have long-term clients sitting in our short-term beds. We're building 2 units out in Mason County. Each unit's 16 beds. One of those units will be for long-term clients, but we're still talking about the difficulty with the triage facility is the backup and moving clients rapidly through that. Discussion we need to have as the BHO board is, do we actually change the use of the triage facility, where right now it's operating as an evaluation treatment facility, involuntary. Do we consider moving that more to a true stabilization beds, like 24 to 72 hours, where it's voluntary. Police can use it, police can do drop-offs, but it's not intended as part of the system of involuntary treatment services. It's a consideration to try to get back more to the purpose of what we intended. We need to clear the dust from these conversion we're going through to take a look at changing that contract for services. It's still allowable with the funding we received to construct it, because it's still functioning as a behavioral health facility, just as a different billing entity, actually.
Okay. Because one of the bills that passed was specifically it's kind of strange language, but it authorizes and encourages law enforcement to take anyone suspected of any crime who is known or the officer has a reasonable belief has a mental health issue to one of these 4 alternative options. One of them is a crisis stabilization unit.
Yeah.
One of them is a triage facility, and I'm still trying to sift through what the distinction is there. And then
Good luck.
Yeah, there's a couple of other options, but those are guidelines that the prosecutor and the disability community and defense have to work through with law enforcement. So I just spoke with the
Yeah,
prosecutor yesterday about that. And so it sounds like his concern, which is kind of was why I'm bringing this up, is, having those options there, the crisis stabilization unit or the triage facility, we can't use them if they're not there. And we talked about how that was the original concept of just what you said, 24 to 72 hour stabilization, voluntary law enforcement drop-off, all that is something that we need it somewhere, whether it's there or somewhere else.
The critical piece to consider as we talk about it is that the services, we would not be the ones contracting for the services. So we lose some control of the building. Second part is right now, the rates that are being applied, that managed care organizations are paying for stabilization beds, we would not be able to sustain that facility because the rates are extremely low. Now, that's a discussion we're having with Healthcare Authority, is can we move up those rates so it's feasible to actually run a stabilization facility. We think that it will go in that direction, and then we'll have a better chance at converting it and being successful with it. I know I've spoken with the operator of that facility. They have experience in running stabilization units in other states, so this would actually be something they would prefer themselves.
Sounds like a lot of more to come.
Yeah, sorry, we kind of moved back into our business as a
Well,
BHO.
more to
but-
come, and for the viewing public, I guess I would point out that a lot of unknowns at this point, but trying to come up with some solutions to deal with mental health in our community. So
Yes.
I would guess we'll probably have some work sessions on this sometime in the future as things develop. Okay? Anything else, sir?
So back to the actual agenda item, the ILA, this is going to go to Mason County as well, and
Yes, they've received it already. They'll be, same as the original ILA, both counties sign the document.
that's on track. Okay, thank you, Mark.
We're good?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And B, each commissioner will give a little brief about last week's activity. And our upcoming schedule will be C. And then we will go into a public hearing at around 3 o'clock or thereabouts.
Yeah, the public hearing, commissioners, is for you to receive public testimony related to change in fees from $220 to $250, and an increase of $30. And this is a request from Superior Court. RCW 10.101.02 parentheses 1 requests the courts to provide indigent defense services within the courts on dependency and juvenile cases. Back in 2015, the Board of County Commissioners passed an ordinance implementing the fee of $220. This past year, the legislature passed increasing the fees to $250, an increase of $30. Under RCW 3618.01016, you as a legislative authority is the only one who can change, implement, or eliminate any fees in the county. That's the reason why you hear the public testimony this afternoon. For your consideration, there's two action items. One is to close the public hearing, and depending on the public testimony that you have, I have available to you a second motion for your consideration, whether you'd like to approve the ordinance increasing the fees. But that will be up to you.
My only question on that is, are we up against a time frame?
I believe so, because the court administrator for Superior Court has been asking as to how quickly it will be. But certainly not to be put pressure on the board. If you feel, depending on the public testimony, if you don't feel that you're in the position to go ahead and approve that, we can schedule that to a later date. That's always within your purview, and I will accommodate that.
Okay, moving on to Tuesday, July 16th's upcoming meeting. All the normal things that we'll work on. I'm going to get all the way down to presentations. We need to talk a little bit about presentations here.
Yes, Mary Ann Clear, the Director of Pretrial Services, will come before you and introduce a new staff member. That will be Nicole Carbone, and she is the new Pretrial Services Diversion Officer. As you may recall, you approved a new position within the Pretrial Services in the 2019-2020 budget, which it was going to be funded by the treatment sales tax, and that selection has been completed. And I believe Nicole started 2 weeks ago. So that will give you the opportunity to meet her and welcome her to the county.
Okay, any questions, sir?
Nope, she was at the meeting this morning and look forward to meeting her formally.
Emergency services.
Yeah, your Director of Emergency Services, Kurt Harding, will be presented to you, acknowledging the Olympia Fire Chief Craig Rice is retiring from service, and he has been providing services to the community for over 30 years. Kurt will bring representatives from Medic 1, Emergency Services, and some fire districts, and also that will give you the opportunity to say farewell to Chief Wright and thank him for the continuing services to the community for the last 30 years.
Okay. Then we'll have, Commissioner, did you have any comment on that? We'll have an opportunity for the public to address the board and the county manager's update. Do you have anything that you're aware of at this point?
Not at this point, Commissioner.
And we'll get to consent items, A through D.
Yes, for your consideration, items 3A and 3B are coming from the assessor's office. And the assessor has worked with the HR, and this first request is for you to consider reclassifying the business applications technician 1 to a appraiser assistant. The position of appraiser assistant, the new position, if you approve this request, will afford the office an opportunity to recruit and train an employee who is not quite certified as an appraiser. And that will give an opportunity to work within the system and also be certified when the time comes. This particular request has an impact on the budget goes from the top scale from $5,257 to $4,541 a month, which is a decrease of $716 a month or 14%.
Okay, that's A and B. How
And
about-
B, I'm sorry,
Oh,
B is related to the same position. In this case, is the assessor always gives himself, I have to give him credit because he always looks for ways as to how he can enhance his business and the services he provides to the citizens. This request is to reclassify the personal property analyst to a senior property control analyst. The impact on the budget on this position goes from $5,257 a month to $5,520. That will be an increase of $263 a month, or 5% increase. So if you add the two requests, A and B, it has a net negative of just about $460 reduction on the budget.
Okay. Any questions, sir? No. How about C?
C is a request from district court, and they would like for you to consider creating a project position. And this project position is a court assistant 2. And at this point, they are not requesting any increase on the budget. The reason for this request is that there is a current staff person who is, I believe, in unexpected absence from the court. So there's really a gap on the resources they have. And the absence is obviously skewed, so that individual is part of the payroll. And the courts will continue to go through that process, but still they need to address the needs of the courts. So this position requires a temporary position that will be ending on June 20th, 2020 or before. Depending as to how the current position is moving forward, I don't want to reveal the details. This position could become permanent, and the position that is currently utilized can become vacant and eliminated. So at the end of the process, the district court is addressing the current need of the workload they have right now. In the long term, they will continue to address their needs, but without creating a new position, if that makes sense.
Robin, any input on that?
So I did work with the court administrator, and they're able to absorb the cost this year within their current budget. They need this new temporary position to backfill the person who is absent, and they expect resolution by the end of the year, so we won't have costs going into the next year. It all works out.
Okay.
Okay, but this does extend through June 30th of next year.
They asked for the
Just in
additional
case.
time in case there is a complication, but,
Expectation is that they're
yeah,
going to, okay.
and they can absorb it.
Okay, and then we'll get down to the auditor's report, and we'll deal with that when the time comes. How about Department Central Services?
For your consideration, Commissioners, is for you to issue a call for bids for work to be done on Building 3. I think some of you have heard the leaking roof on District Court, which is located in Building 3. And in order to address the leaking roof, we need to do some small work on the HVAC system, which is located on the roof. So this particular project will address specifically the leaking roof on District Court, and also do some work related to the HVAC system located within the area of the leak. This is going to be covered by the building reserves, and we have adequate funding to do that. And this is included on the capital facilities plan also.
Okay. Public Health and Social Services.
Good.
Any questions?
No.
Public Health and Social Services.
So this item I'd like to take out for your consideration because based on the dollar amount, this is within the preview of the director. So the director is in the position to go ahead and sign this agreement without the approval of the board. So we'll take this out, so you will not see this item on your agenda next year.
And what is that dollar amount?
This is $45,000 with additional 10% variation that will put it to $49,500. And the new procurement policy allows any director to sign any contracts $50,000 and below.
Okay. Any questions, sir? Emergency Services.
For your consideration is to have an agreement with Ms. Diana Bird for $96,717.71. And back in 2015, we received a $215,000 from the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program, which this particular funding allows to elevate properties that have been prone to flooding during high storm events. And again, this is a pass-through grant. They will work with the property owner, in this case is Ms. Bird, to elevate the home that she has, and that's a common practice, the FEMA practice on the flood areas. It requires a match. However, the match is going to be given by the property owner and not the county. So there's really not an impact on the county, but since we are the agency who receives the federal fund, we are in the position to manage that and issue the contract for elevating the property. This property is located on 18726 Dynamite Drive Southeast, that is in Yelm, Washington. Any questions?
Say again, Yelm.
Yelm. And by the way, it's along the Deschutes River, this property.
How does this property in particular get selected? I mean, out of what other potentially?
The director may give you some additional information on that.
Kurt Harden, Director of Emergency Services. What we do is one of our staff maintains a list of frequently flooded or impacted residences throughout the county. And then we reach out and contact property owners and see if they're willing to participate. And we do it on a priority list so that the ones that get impacted repetitively through various flooding issues, we put them to the top of the list, give them the first opportunity to accept these funds. Generally, we have multiple properties that might be flooding, that where the homeowners may not be willing to participate because there is a local match that they have to participate in the cost. But we reach out to the homeowners and work with them on that.
So going down the list and seeing who wants to
Correct. We
participate with
just go down the
match.
list and see who wants to participate. This particular one is federal funds. We also work with State Department of Ecology to get some of their FCAP funding. We also work with the Chehalis Flood District to get funding from them. So we have a number of funding sources that we utilize to try to do home elevations for repetitive flood loss.
How many properties are on our list?
I can get that answer for you, sir. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay. Thanks, Kurt.
Can you answer what is the motivation for a property owner to participate in this program?
The motivation is that we get them above the base flood elevation level, so that therefore their property is not going to flood over the 100 or 500-year floodplain. Because if they have repetitive flood loss, even if they're insured through the National Flood Insurance Program, you still have the cost of, or the effort to repair your home, to replace furniture, to replace appliances that are flooded out. So the effort is one, FEMA provides 87.5% of the cost, and two, there's also another federal program under the National Flood Insurance Program where the homeowner can apply for what we call Improved Cost of Compliance, ICC program, where they could actually be made whole and not have to any out-of-pocket costs through that other federal program. So when you come down to it, the homeowner quite often can have no out-of-pocket costs between the two federal programs.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, if you have the ability. We did some brainstorming in the Chehalis Basin group about how to structure these types of programs to make them more attractive to the homeowner. What would be more, to get the most people that sign on, because it just benefits everybody.
And one of the things you provide also is staff provides technical assistance for applying for this ICC program under the National Flood Insurance Program. They provide that technical assistance. While the county is not financially obligated for that local cost, we do try to help the homeowner as much as possible, because anyone who's experienced federal regulations or applications, they can be a little daunting sometimes. So we have staff that work with them to help them with technical assistance. And I would like to also add that CPED staff work with us in this as well. So it's a joint effort between not only emergency management, but also CPED staff, because they have a lot of the responsibility here to help out the homeowners as well.
Good. Thank you, sir. And then we'll have the typical county manager follow-up. Do you have anything to add at this point, sir?
No, sir. I will just walk you through your upcoming schedule.
Okay, and if everybody is fine with that, we'll take a 10-minute break. Okay, welcome back to live streaming, July 9th, 2019. And next up, we've got La Bonita going to talk to us a little bit about proclamations and awards and advisory boards or something.
Something like that. La Bonita Bomar, Clerk of the Board. The proclamations and awards, I don't have any new items today. The next proclamation that you will be seeing on your agenda, which you've already signed, is the pre-trial and probation week, and that will be July the 23rd.
What information are you waiting?
Pardon me?
What information are you waiting for the proclamation?
Oh, I'm not waiting for anything anymore, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
No, we're done on that one. The other proclamations are for August, and that's going to be National Farmers Market Week and National Preparedness Month. So we have a little ways out, and I will be bringing those to you when I have them in draft form. Next on the list is advisory boards and commissions. You have a new application for the Area Agency on Aging, and that's from Judy Stratton. She submitted her application on Sunday, and I have submitted it to the Area Agency as of yesterday, Monday.
Okay?
I'm not looking for any immediate,
We should hear back in a week or so, I suppose.
yes, yes.
Huh? Okay.
The other item that I have, just for your information, an update, the Housing Authority. I have been putting together the actual applications of each one of the members. There are 5 members. So I have been working with the Housing Authority, Craig Chance, and I'm also working with County Manager Romero Chavez regarding the term limits, bylaws that we will be bringing back in 2020 spring. But I wanted to let you know I am working with the getting your application, so you at least have that to review
Okay.
on each member. Other than that, I don't have any other boards and commissions.
Commissioner, do you have any questions of La Bonita?
No.
Okay. Thank you. And next, we go to PIO check-in, Public Information Officer check-in.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Dominique, Public Information Officer for Thurston County. So just a couple quick updates. Fair tickets are now available online at www.thurstoncountyfair.org. And I am also working on promotions for the Thurston County Pancake Breakfast, which is going to be on Saturday, August 3rd from 8:30 to 10 a.m. We have some information out about it on Facebook now, and we're looking at some other avenues like radio and things to get the word out about that event. And then also, Megan has received the first draft of the informational video on the courthouse project that we're working on. Her and I will be working through the editing process with TC Media and trying to get that out as soon as possible. Just a couple other quick updates. July is National Parks and Recreation Month, and that is also the focus of our July episode of Thurston County Connection, hosted by Commissioner Menzer. That is scheduled for release this Friday, so we'll be highlighting some of the great parks and recreation options we have here in the county. And then our summer edition of County Up Close will be going out next week. And for the viewing public, there is a subscription option for the newsletter to receive it directly to your inbox. You can go to the homepage and select the County News tab and subscribe to it. And with a subscription, you also receive like featured news stories and videos that we put out as we put them out. So you can just get that delivered straight to you. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
I don't have any questions. Sir, do you have?
Thurston County Up Close is that a new name for?
It's the County Up Close. That is our quarterly external newsletter. We've had that since last year.
Okay. I'm gonna keep them straight because there's an internal one as well.
Yeah, that's a Thurston Insider.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, sir.
As a follow-up, actually, we're working on 3 videos related to the courthouse. One is the informational videos you heard from Brian. The other one is we have filmed Rick Thomas, the project manager. He's walking through the PowerPoint presentation that we are making available to anybody who wants to hear the details of the project. And also we coordinated with the county treasurer, Jeff Gathman, and we had a taping last week where he is just verbalizing on a video the frequently asked questions. There is not a promotional videos. There is not anything insinuating one way or the other related to this particular ballot measure in April 2020. And this is informational, presented in a different way that is already available to the public on the project website.
That it?
That sounds good, yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, County Manager, I think you're next. Briefing, public hearing decisions
We
pending.
don't have anything pending for your decision, Commissioners.
Okay, Commissioner items, Yelm Tenino Trail Study.
Yeah, here we have a coordinated presentation with the Thurston Regional Planning Council and Public Works, and this is related to a study on the Yelm Tenino Trail. This study was funded by a federal grant, and before getting too much into the punchline of this presentation, I will leave it to those individuals to introduce themselves and walk us through the presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Paul Brewster, Senior Planner with Thurston Regional Planning Council.
And I'm Whitney Holm with SCJ Alliance.
Is anybody from Public Works?
And we do have some co-conspirators on the project, stakeholders. Would you like to split them? Sure. Are we gonna have a heads-up display on the presentation?
I don't know.
No? Okay.
We
all
have
right.
copies of.
You have
the-
copies? Okay, very
Yeah.
good.
And for anybody, I'll point out in the public that wants to have
And
a
the
copy.
copies is available online, included on the agenda, on today's agenda. So it's
Okay,
available.
great, thank you. So Thurston Regional Planning Council awarded a federal grant to a joint proposal from Tenino and Bucota to do a feasibility study. And this really was an exploratory technical study to look at options for expanding Thurston County's Yelm Tenino Trail south to the town of Bucota, basically from the Tenino Train Depot Museum in Tenino City Park, south to Bucota, and west out to Tenino city limits. And the aims of that was twofold. Back around 2003, when Thurston Regional Planning Council was working with the county and Lacey and Olympia to do the Bridging the Gap project, back then Michael Welter of the Thurston County Parks Department said that it was the goal of Thurston County Trails to expand every community in Thurston County to the Puget Sound. And TRPC adopted a regional trails plan in 2007. And what was noticeably missing from both the county trails plan goals and TRPC's regional trails plan is Bucota is not connected to the Puget Sound. So this study was an attempt to go back and really try to look at options for connecting Bucota. Tenino, in their comprehensive plan, has a trail extension shown as part of a transportation recreation facility, a shared use path, more or less along the alignment that is in this packet that we'll talk through. But Bucota had an additional interest, not just being connected to the trail system, but Bucota has multiple hazards from which they're vulnerable, and that the BNSF railway main line cuts off the community if a train was stalled or there was a derailment. Bucota could not get across 7th Avenue to get back onto State Route 507. They would really have to go around Tono Road. But also Bucota frequently floods from the Skookumchuck River, which could also cut off. So they were interested in sort of looking at an emergency access route in and out of Bucota on the north end of town from their public works facility north along the BNSF railway main line. So TRPC led the study. It was about a $65,000 total Transportation Alternatives Program grant. We hired SCJ Alliance to help us perform the feasibility study. And I just want to list the stakeholders from Bucota. We had Mayor Alan Carr. Tenino was Mayor Wayne Fournier and the Clerk Treasurer John Millard. From Thurston County Public Works, we had both Carrie Hibden and Scott Davis, and Teresa Parsons also filled in on one of the meetings. From Washington Department of Transportation, Olympic Region, multimodal planner, Teresa Turpin, and TJ Nedro, who's now retired, was their transportation demand management planner. And of course, myself. And the objectives of this were, as you can see on that slide, was to really look at those two corridors, south to Bucota and west to Tenino city limits, and explore the alternative routes, consider their feasibility, come up with cost estimates, consider trail design, consider where there's intersections to consider traffic safety, evaluate if there were any environmental constraints related to water resource issues or sensitive wildlife habitat issues, and then identify next steps and then a funding and implementation strategy. So I'm going to have Whitney, we're kind of tag teaming this presentation, kind of talk a little bit about the planning process. Don't know if you can see my smaller version.
I'll go here. So we did this, we wanted to make sure the stakeholders really bought in, so we did it with a couple of different workshops. In our first workshop, we kind of just went over some preliminary alignments and where the trail could possibly go. And we also really wanted to get their opinions on what kind of criteria were we going to base the alignments off of how to make their recommendation. So that was the first meeting, and then the second meeting, we did use the pairwise comparison to figure out how people would want to weight the criteria. And so once we got all the information, we weighted all the criterias and figured out what the most important criteria was, and then we put it on each alignment to kind of have a better idea of how each alignment not only got the cost, but also with the criteria of which would be our recommendation. So we went over those results in workshop 2 to make sure that all the stakeholders were on board, and everyone was on board and everyone agreed, although not everyone had the same criteria weighted, it was all very similar, so we were able to come to a conclusion on one. And then from there, we drafted up a preliminary feasibility report, sent it back to the stakeholders, got their opinion, and that's where we are right now. We are finalizing that report.
You want to talk about the evaluation criteria?
Yeah, and so the criteria that we came up with was perceived safety, and that's really when someone's on the trail, how safe do they feel? Would you want to have your kid there on the trail with you? Trail ambiance. Are you taking this trail to really enjoy the outdoors, or are you taking it just to get from one place to another? Water resource conflict. There are a lot of floodplains, there are streams, and so what alignment limits the crossings of these water resource conflicts? Directness of route. How direct is the route? Are we having to wind a lot and so people aren't actually going to want to take that route, or is it go to A to B with pretty straight line? And then closure due to flooding, and that really has to affect from Tenino to Bucota, because like Paul said, when there's flooding or if there's a train blocking 7th Avenue, they can't leave, and so we do have one alignment that is pretty much a raised trail all the way from Bucota to Tenino, so even a 100-year flood, it would be above that flood level. And how important is that to all the stakeholders?
So I'm on slide 7 now in your packet. The segment of the trail that we believe the county is most interested in is that that stretch from Tenino City Park south to the town of Bucota, because that goes within the county's right-of-way. So that's going to really be kind of the focus of talking about those alignments. The known issues are right now, if someone from Tenino or Bucota wants to travel to either community by foot or on bike, you're really relegated to using a portion of Crowder Road, then 184th Avenue, and then you're on the shoulder of State Route 507. And anybody who's traveled along State Route 507 knows that you have a narrow shoulder, and then there's a ditch, and then there's the railroad. So not the most pleasant environment to walk in. But we also know that on the east side of the railroad, north to south, we have some steep slopes. We have floodplains, wetlands, and Mazama pocket gopher habitat. And fortunately, there's only one property owner within the alignment on the east side of the railroad tracks, and that's the Jensen owns the parcels along that segment south of 183rd Avenue to Bucota. So in your packet, in the slides, I have illustrations that show Mazama pocket gopher soil indicators. So from light to dark is the preference, with darkest being the most preferred type of soil, lightest being the least preferred. So we know that there's a likelihood of pocket gophers being sited within this corridor between 507 and the other side of the railroad. We also have wetlands due to the whole Skookumchuck River complex down there. And we also have 100-year and 500-year floodplains. That's illustrated through the next slide. So you can kind of see that challenge right there. We really have some sensitive areas that we're going to need to get through. So one of the alignments, we labeled them geographical reach. The first one is geographical reach 1. It traverses from the Tenano Depot Museum to 184th Avenue Southeast. That's approximately 2.5 miles. So this would be a trail that would be using the county's right-of-way through the undeveloped portion of the trail through the park until it reaches Crowder Road. And then it would likely be it would follow, if you were traveling south, it would be on the southbound lane side of the road. So it would be on the west side of Crowder Road, if you will. It would be separated by a planter strip. There's an illustration, we'll get to that, but that would traverse in Thurston County right-of-way along Crowder Road. And then from there, there's two options where the trail could split. One would be it continues south along the east side of the BNSF Railway. That's GR2A. That is geographic reach 2, so that is going through Jensen's property. As I said, we have 100-year floodplain. So we looked at two options there. GR2A would be an at-grade trail. The challenge with this trail is it would be subject to flooding because Thurston County's development regulations are very effective, but you do prohibit grading in the floodplain unless it's, like for an emergency. So this would be a trail that during really wet seasons when it would flood, portions of that trail would be closed unless you have your waders on and you don't mind getting your feet wet. But there are also two structures that would be required. One, there's a drainage in there, so we would have a pin pile bridge type structure. The other is a stream, which we suspect might be fish bearing, so that would likely require an additional bridge over that structure as well. So the total cost in here for that one is $4.2 million. That's including both GR1, that 2.5 mile section along Crowder Road, and that GR2A along the east side of the tracks. The first portion is about $2 million along Crowder Road for that construction.
The GR1 alone is what is it?
It's a little over $2 million.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, it's not showing on your slides, but we also did an evaluation for an emergency route. So this is if there's a 4,000-foot section through floodplains and wetlands that we would have to elevate the trail on pin piles if we were to have it structurally sound for an emergency aid vehicle to travel on for, like, say, Medic 1 or Thurston County Sheriff to get into the community of Bucota in the event of an emergency, and let's say State Route 507 at 7th Avenue was closed. The cost of that came out to around $29 million. So quite expensive. So we didn't really think that was a real viable option. We want to be looking to other options for emergency services in and out of Bucota in the event of the train blocking the path. But then we also looked at the State Route 507, and in your packet there's two artist renderings of what the trail corridor would look like. The section of Crowder Road, if you were looking south from Tenino, you would have a 5-foot vegetative strip, would be grass that would need to be mowed, but then you would have a 10-foot shared use separated paved path. For the State Route 507, any of you familiar with driving south on I-5 through the Centralia Chehalis area, if you were to look west and see Airport Road, you would see a Jersey barrier there that's separating Airport Road from a trail. That would be a similar configuration or design configuration for what would be used on State Route 507 to provide the physical barrier between motor vehicles and trucks and bicycles and pedestrians on the trail. So once you would reach 184th Avenue on Crowder, you would then turn west and then proceed south on that trail that would be separated. That was GR2B. That was around $1 million for the construction of that alternative. The advantage of that alternative is less expensive. It wouldn't close from flooding. However, it was a less attractive route in terms of trail ambience and perceived safety. So we also looked at the West Tenino extension. So leaving from Tenino Park, headed out towards the Alpaca Farm on Old 99. If we were in here 10 years ago, this would have been a county project, but Tenino annexed western portion of the city limits, so they now own Old Highway 99. So this is their trail corridor now. The preferred option was geographical reach 4, which basically from the intersection of State Route 507 and Old 99 heading out west toward the Alpaca Farm, that was the preferred alternative. About 1.6 miles. The proposal for that was like the Crowder Road design, where you would have a landscaped strip and a 10-foot trail. We looked at both sides, both on the south and the north side of the road. Tenino was leaning towards having the trail on the south side of the road, which would connect to some future community destinations like their agriculture park. We also looked at, and then the connection would be along 6th Avenue from the Depot Museum to make that connection to the park. So the total cost estimate for that segment was $2.23 million. That doesn't include the cost of the need to replace the bridge over Scatter Creek, which is functionally obsolete, meaning that while it's structurally sound, it doesn't meet current standards for multimodal use. So there's not enough width there to accommodate vehicles and bicycle and pedestrians at the same time. So that would be an additional cost. If Tenino were to upgrade that bridge in the future, they would want to make sure they're incorporating multimodal components to that project. We looked at other city alignments in Tenino, and those are captured in the plan. But I'm going to have Whitney talk about the criteria and how some of that scored.
Yeah. So if you can look at this graph, you can see that perceived safety was the most important criteria that we wanted to base the recommendation off.
Can I stop you?
This criteria graph?
You,
Yeah.
you refer to slides, and sometimes you're referring to numbers of slides, but ours aren't numbered.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm just like spending half the time flipping around trying to figure out where you guys are. Sorry, but.
Yeah, I apologize. We didn't have the overhead to show you on that.
So what I'm going to be talking to is a graph that looks like this.
It's after the last map that has the title on it, West Tenino.
Criteria on the left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, as you can see, perceived safety was the most important. Right behind it was trail ambiance, and then we went directness of route. So when we looked at all the different alignments, those were weighted the heaviest. And then on the next page, on the next slide, you can see these graphs where each geographical reach, and it's hard with not a map in front of you, but it tells you how each one scored, how the performance was. And so that was with each criteria weighted for each of the alternatives. And so you can see for geographical reach 2, there's geographical reach 2A, 2A EV, and that's for emergency vehicles. That's that $27 million one. And then right above it, the 2B, and that's along 507. So geographical reach 2B scored about a 0.35 versus geographical reach 2A scored about a 0.75. And that just shows that for performance-wise, geographical reach 2A was much higher. But that did not look into cost at all. That was just performance using the criteria that we had mentioned earlier.
And this is the A and B versus B is this is the Jersey barrier versus the
Correct. This
the
is
separated
Yeah,
trail.
this would be private property going over Jensen's property versus going on 507 with a Jersey barrier.
And that, okay, and that does weight the water issue
Correct,
as
yeah.
well. Okay.
And then the next slide is kind of just an overview of all the costs for each of the geographical reaches. Paul really kind of went over that, but this breaks it out for each geographical reach. And so I'm going to kind of skip over that one since we already discussed the cost of each of them. And then the next one was performance. The value of each alignment. And so how we got the value was we took the value or the performance divided by the cost of each alignment. And that's where we get, can I see that? Make sure
Yeah,
I'm looking at the
you're
same
not
thing.
gonna see very good online,
Okay.
but.
This is where you can see that geographical reach 2A just slightly beats out the geographical reach 2B. And that's just because the performance, the criteria, we really rated 2A high, but it was more expensive than 2B. But even with cost involved, we still recommend the geographical reach 2A. And that's the alignment that goes along the private property, so it's separated from the road. Then the next slide, the last slide, is the next steps.
Yeah, so SCJ Alliance is really putting a bow on the final report. We'll make that available to you. Staff has reviewed the draft report and provided feedback to Whitney to incorporate into the plan. And right now, we're in the phase of the planning project to present the findings of the report. You were first on our stop. Tonight, Whitney and I are at Tenino City Council, and tomorrow night we're at the Tenino Planning Commission, and then in August we're presenting to Town of Bucota Council. So what we're looking for them is to the communities. Today, for you, this is just a presentation and a briefing. But what we'll be gearing up for Tenino and Bucota is what sort of action do they want to take on the study? Do they want to approve the study? We will be advising them on how they can incorporate the study and make recommendations in their comprehensive plan to integrate this plan. TRPC is going to be in the process of updating the Thurston Regional Trails Plan starting this fall. So we'll be incorporating this findings from this study in that regional trails plan for TRPC's consideration. But then really for this project to proceed, it would be finding funding to perform the preliminary engineering and design, obtaining any right-of-way that would be required, and funding for construction. And so possible funding sources for that, it could be in areas that there would be development. It could be some impact fees. It could be federal funding. It could be surface transportation block program grants, transportation alternative program or enhancement grants. It could be Washington State bicycle and pedestrian safety grants, and I believe even Thurston County's real estate excise tax could possibly be included for some portion of this project. So those are just some of the funding sources that could be used over time to proceed. And in the alignment that we really laid out today, south to Bucota, that would really be Thurston County. You you would be in the driver's seat on that project in partnership with Tenino and Bucota, that since this is largely going through Thurston County right-of-way, but this is really early in the stages of the conversation for what the strategy would be for this geographical reach 1 and geographical reach 2A. If the communities in the county decided that 2B was better for cost savings to go along State Route 507, then we want to be working closely with Washington Olympic Region to be considering that alignment.
Commissioner? So it seems like the two legs, if I call it that, are kind of independent. I mean, one could be pursued and not the other.
Correct.
And is there any sense from Tenino, I mean, would they, if there was funding that would be applicable one versus the other, are they more interested in extending west, or are they more interested in connecting to Bucota? Do you know? Or you have any
It
sense of
depends
that?
on who you ask, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think it would be in Tenino's interest to want to expand the trail west, but this study didn't present any priority, and that would be, I think, the conversation for policymakers to have. Tenino is connected into the regional trail system via Yelm Tenino Trail up to the Chehalis Western. Bucota's out there on its own, and it doesn't have any community connectivity, so I think Bucota would consider that they would be the priority trail project, so.
Understood.
You know.
So in terms of, I mean, if you look at this map where, the first map, I think,
Right.
and Tenino, so you go to Tenino city limits, and then is there a vision for, I mean, do they think that this will in the future connect further west, or?
No, we did not get that far with that particular segment along Old 99. I think Tenino's interest was really in connecting Tenino residents and future Tenino residents into the downtown core and the rest of the trail system.
Okay, if they had development out there
Yes.
in that western piece, and,
Right.
okay.
Romero.
Yeah, I have a question on the criteria. Do you have the slide? And I read the criteria and I read the description, but I'm struggling to connect as to how you assign, for instance, the closure due to flooding at 8.3%.
Yeah.
And the variance is on the priority 35%. What does that mean?
Okay, so are you familiar with pairwise comparison? That's okay. So you kind of go head to head. So perceived safety, I would ask, what's more important, perceived safety versus trail ambiance? And then you would say one of them. So perceived safety, and so perceived safety would get 1 point. And then you go perceived safety versus water resource conflict. And you would say whichever one you had. So each one gets a certain amount of points, and then you divide it by all of the points. And so perceived safety had 33% of the points that you just created, and the directness of route or the closure due to flooding got 8% of the votes. Does that kind of make sense?
Right, it's relative importance to the reviewers.
When you say the vote, so it's a stakeholder review who
It's a
weighs
subjective
into.
stakeholder
Okay, I got you. I
So
think
yeah,
that's
so
the
everyone-
answer I was
Yes.
looking
Okay.
for.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because who assigns the, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's a
and that-
subjective weighting process.
And because we have other topics going, and I think it's going to be a while before we get this project going, dollar-wise, I mean, what's the range? The minimum amount to get it done to the maximum amount to get it done? Just real quick, what's the range of dollars?
I think it was
Just roughly.
3 to 4 million for the stretch to Bucota.
And how about the range going to the west, to the city limits? Headed towards Grays Harbor, for an example.
Oh, I can't go to Grace
No,
Harbor.
no, no.
But yeah,
no,
the direction,
but head
right.
that
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah,
yes,
I think the trail itself was over 2 million, but
Yeah,
that didn't account for a
2.5.
bridge,
Yeah.
that would be necessary.
Over,
Yeah.
okay. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more discussion on this as time goes on. Yes, sir.
And absolutely, and thank you. This is a good informational piece. As we get to, who will take the lead on those projects, it will be a good conversation to have. Well, the money will come from to build those projects also. That will be yet another challenge. But I think internally, is as we build infrastructure for parks, we don't have the money to maintain it. And that is the reality that we as a county have. And although we may have the ability to build infrastructure, but we lack the ability to maintain it. And nothing for you to resolve, it's just on a statement.
Well, at some point, the legislature will have to
On a
get
statement that I'd like to make, because that's something that we internally are struggling with, even with the current infrastructure that we have.
And I think with the regional trails plan update, we want to look at that maintenance issue across the county. Because I think the other jurisdictions struggle with the same issue.
Not to the same extent that the
Probably
county
not.
does. Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next on the agenda is low-impact development.
Commissioners, you asked for staff to come back and give you a perspective as to where we are on the development code approach related to low-impact development, particularly related to impervious surfaces. And staff is ready to walk you through as to a little bit of history behind this, as well as where we are, and leading to perhaps some opportunities based on what we perceive the direction of the board has been given in the past. So with that in mind.
Great. Thank you. Joshua Cummings, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. To my left, I have Brett Burris, who is our Planning Manager in CPED for the current Planning Development Services. And to my right is Kevin Hughes with Public Works Development Review. All right. And so to the County Manager's point, we wanted to take this opportunity to do a brief update on the low-impact development standards and where we have had successes and opportunities. And Brett will go through the first slide here that has the history and kind of why we have to do it in the first place. But recognizing that from the perspective of the CPED, Community Planning and Economic Development and Public Works, we have implemented the ordinances and codes that were put in place by the partnership that Brett will talk about. What we have seen is that there are opportunities for successes in terms of the properties that may be 2.5 acres and below, and then also in tweaking some of the standards. But what we will likely do, just so that we're all on the same page, two of the main staff members that had really been diving into this over the past few years, Allison Osterberg and Mike Kane, have moved on to other opportunities outside of the county. So we're working to re-engage our staff to get up to speed and to have a more in-depth, detailed conversation about what we can do on those items that we source as opportunities. But what I'm hoping to accomplish today is a brief update on LID, where we were and where we are, and then to receive your questions, commissioners, that we can be thinking about to ensure that we're addressing and will address in an upcoming more in-depth briefing. So that's the intent of this update. So I'll pass the mic over to Mr. Burris.
Thank you very much. As Josh has mentioned, I will give a brief history where we're at, where we're going as it relates to low-impact development. From slide number 1, you will see the bubble that outline, first of all, NPDES permit, the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, is regulated through the United States Environmental Protection Agency, but delegated to the Department of Ecology. And so when those requirements to take a look at our code and review and evaluate where we can reduce new impervious surface, partnerships were then created both internally and externally. Partnerships included 14 different professional organizations or groups, internal staff, TRPC, the cities Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater, all reviewing and analyzing to determine what the next steps are and what the best approach for low-impact development standards and impervious surface standards are. Through that process, the intent was to provide consistency and flexibility. In the past, there were no hard surface standards that were specific to each zoning designation. And the overall goal was to create hard surface standards for all zoning designations and provide flexibility as it relates to the limits allowed in each zone. And from that, successes did come about. Ordinance 15355 was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners, which did again, provide that consistency of hard surface standards for each zone, and also the flexibility to allow for credits to increase impervious surface standards through an LID process of providing types of development that would improve clean water and stormwater. I'd also like to note that all applications since 2017 have gone through this process and approach, and the consistency and flexibility has been applied. Also mentioned by Mr. Cummings is that opportunities for the future, it's been noted and understood that properties under 2.5 acres or less do not have the same flexibility that properties greater than that do have. And that would be the bonus or the increase in impervious surface standards that are allowed right now. So that was intended to be a quick, brief history. And if I follow what Josh presented to you, we are here to receive your questions as it relates to low-impact development. Sorry.
Thank you. And then, so that's the overview. You can see that the why is that we're required to by the federal government, then the state government, and then the county government. So another opportunity for the local government to enact regulations that are provided to us from governments above our stature.
Above your pay grade.
And in so doing, in implementing the regulations that we were required to do, we partnered with multiple groups. And so, once again, an opportunity for county government to find a balance between the needs of development and the needs of the environment. And we brought together a wide range of groups, as you can see there, from the environmental groups and development groups and the realtors. Like we've talked about, you can flip the page over to the green side, which has a little more detail in the timeline of how we got to where we are. And from our perspective, there are opportunities in the 2.5 acres and below, like Brett relayed. But in a larger sense, what we're thinking about also, as was mentioned in the past by the Board of County Commissioners, is do we revisit the entire discussion? Do we go back to the partnership stage and relook at the LID standards as a whole? If we do that, if we take that larger scope, that could potentially impact all of what the successes that we've already talked about have had. But we're looking for that as a scope. We have with us Kevin Hughes, who was a part of that initial partnership conversation. And so he can actually shed some more light on some of those conversations that took place back in 2015, 16, and then led into what our current regulations are. But as it stands right now, we do believe that there is opportunities, most specifically at the 2.5 acre and below level. We also have Mike Kane, before he departed our organization, had created a policy that's in draft and legal review with our prosecuting attorney's office. So there are actions that have been going on since 2017, but we wanted to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row, as it were, before we provide those to you. So questions or more background from Kevin Hughes? What is the preference of the commissioners?
I don't have a question. Are you in the position to give us an example? You talk about the threshold being the 2.5 acres. And you speak about those properties above the 2.5 acres, they have opportunities of flexibility. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? And also for those acres less than 2.5 acres, they don't have that flexibility in terms of the impervious surfaces. What does that mean? Just give us if you're in the position to do so, provide an example of that.
Yeah, I'm gonna not try and surprise Kevin, but from our perspective, it's the partnerships that were arranged in the first place address 2.5 acres and above, and it's the percentage of land that you have available to utilize in that flexibility. When you get down below 2.5 acres and below, your land is constrained, so your flexibility is constrained. That's from my interpretation of it, but I'll let the technical expert answer a much better conversation.
Yeah, so Kevin Hughes, Thurston County Public Works Development Review. I don't have a ton of experience with the zoning code that established this, but again, in dealing with Mike Kane through the last couple of years of trying to implement this, because some of the credits that were offered were intimately related to the drainage manual. And so we worked quite a bit on this. And so that's the way I understand it, is the way Josh explained it was, once you get into these larger acreage properties, it is designed to have a percentage of your lot for hard surface or impervious surface coverage, and then establishing these additional credits, because with more acreage, you are provided more opportunity for development. It's understood that someone with more acreage is going to want to possibly have an extra barn or an extra shop or more driveway if they want to be at the back of their property. So it establishes that 10%. So the more acreage you have, the more coverage you get. When you drop below the 2.5 acres, you get into a more restricted development site. You don't have that additional area to lay out. And I believe, I forget what the cutoff is, but I believe once you get under 2.5, I think it's restricted to 10% max. It's no longer a percent, not 10%, 10,000 square feet max. It's no longer a percentage. You're given an actual square footage amount. And the way the code is written is that all the credits apply to the percentage wise, but none of the credits apply to the maximum total square footage coverage for the 2.5 acres or below. So I think what Josh was explaining, that there's opportunity to take the area that was kind of overlooked, the 2.5 acres and below, and provide the similar credit opportunities. And so to get to your question as to what those credits look like. So when you're over 2.5 acres, some of the credits are if you can demonstrate that your impervious coverage fully disperse. Now that's defined by the drainage manual, so we go back and look. So instead of dispersing your area through 10 feet, if you can disperse through 100 feet, it's considered fully dispersed. If you can put your roof runoff into an infiltration trench where it infiltrates into the groundwater, it doesn't ever get off your site, that can be considered fully dispersed. And so if you meet that criteria, you're given a 50% credit on whatever you can fully disperse. There's other opportunities, and that's the one that I'm most familiar with, is that credit. I believe there are other credits available.
But they don't apply to the 2.5 acres or less.
I don't think any of these apply below 2.5.
Right. Okay.
And I believe, and there's also this policy that's in review, drafted up by Mike Kane and several other, myself included, in long-range planning folks, provided a template for people to go through a special use permit if they couldn't qualify for these percentages, or these credits, or if they wanted more than the credits allowed. The special use process allowed them to go through additional standards to be able to get that increase. But it was a separate, I believe it's administrative at this point.
Right. Commissioner, where would we go if we wanted to see how we stacked up in comparison to other jurisdictions that have done this same thing, and how they have addressed these same situations? Obviously, I am looking for the least restriction that we can put on the property owner and still protect the environment. So in this case, it looks like they were just overlooked on the 2.5 acres and less. What about other jurisdictions? Have others already addressed this issue and been successful on maybe still not coming up with potential challenges from groups that might disagree?
It's ironic that Larry shows up at the table, because I had the conversation with him this morning about other jurisdictions that may have adopted something similar to this, and there's some case law
Brian.
about this. So.
And if there is case law, have all those other jurisdictions abided by that, and that is the law of the land, that type of thing too?
So to address that question, I think there were two different paths taken here. When the LID group met, we were tasked with what the NPDES permit at that time required of us. It was to get a group together, to identify all your codes, look through all your standards, and to identify barriers to low impact development. Something like, so our building department allowing green roofs. That's a low impact development strategy. So our building folks are brought in to say, hey, is there anything we can do with our building codes that will allow a green roof to go on Another example of this is in our right-of-way. We used to not allow infiltration facilities within our right-of-ways. Low-impact development says, put the water back where it was as close to the source of where the runoff is happening. Well, that source is right next to our roads. And so we adopted a new standards in our road standards that allows biofiltration and infiltration facilities within our right-of-ways to accomplish. So that's an example of barriers that were identified and removed.
Okay.
What I believe happened in this particular case was there's this 6510 full dispersion BMP, and it has this 10% impervious coverage. And the idea is that if you
Can
can,
you spell out BMP?
sorry,
the acronym?
best management practice. And so it's used, so it's a drainage best management practice. And so when the state issued this permit to the county, they mandated that we adopt a manual that put low-impact development as one of our highest priorities. And so there's these low-impact development lists. Full dispersion is at the top of that list. And the way it's defined is you set aside 65% of your property in a native state. You can only develop 35% of your property, and you can only have 10% maximum impervious coverage limits. That is one of the low-impact development. That's the highest priority. So I think what happened was at the same time this was going on, there was this issue of all these different impervious coverage limits in the county. They were trying to make it so it was more consistent. They recognized that to have this good balance between the developed environment and the native environment, 10% is that kind of that sweet spot.
Who came up with that? 10%?
It was through,
This group?
well, no, the 60.
I'm told that isn't necessarily the case, that everybody didn't agree. But
No, so the 6510 was through the low impact development manual that was developed for Puget Sound. And the state took that recommendation and put it into their stormwater drainage manual. That is where that comes from. So to meet the full dispersion requirement, you have to have the 65, 35, and 10% impervious coverage. I think what happened is that 10% was, if that's kind of that sweet spot, then the board decided to take the 10% and establish it across the rural community to have that consistency. And so I think they just latched onto that 10%. So that's
okay.
where that 10% came from.
So let me clarify just a little bit, I think. So the 6510 is a state-adopted regulation, right?
Recommendation.
Recommendation.
The state requires us to adopt it through their permit, but yes, they have it in their drainage manual.
And then the group of this partnership here took that recommendation from the drainage manual and applied it for consistency's sake to the rest of the ordinance.
Yeah, it wasn't, our task in that group was to identify barriers. I don't think that falls into the category of being a barrier necessarily to low impact development, because we never, the code never restricted people to develop more than that. They could always restrict themselves down to 10%. But that 10% was kind of that piece. So that's where that 10% came from. I don't believe that was necessarily the mandate of our group to come up with that number for the zoning, because we were tasked with identifying barriers and eliminating those barriers. That zoning piece wasn't necessarily a barrier. It was just, we're in the code. It's a convenient time to update the code to make it consistent, make it standard. And so they used that opportunity to put that 10% in there.
Okay. I'm still looking for a way to adjust that so people can do some things with their property and still protect the environment. That's kind of where I'm at on it. I know we're not making a policy decision here, but
No, that's helpful. That's the information that we're looking for in terms of what the commission or commissioners are focused on us looking at. And I want to address just real quickly, I think Kevin had a good point that was in there, and Brett had addressed it also in terms of consistency. And the identification of barriers and elimination of barriers, the creating standards that are the same throughout all of the zoning areas was a really big piece of this puzzle. And so there's a huge success in there. We know that developing and permitting and planning is confusing for applicants. But this process and that consistency did help reduce a lot of that confusion. So there is a success in there. But back to your question on the benchmarking, how do we compare with other counties? We have Larry Schaffner here at the table, who was our MPDS. Remember, that's the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. He is the staff member that oversees that permit that essentially informs all of the reason that we do all of this work. So I'm going to pass the microphone, if that's okay, down to Larry real quick.
He has a microphone.
Oh, great, perfect. To provide some input on
He has his own
that.
microphone.
Thanks.
Yeah, good morning. So we can reach out, and I would suggest other counties, if you wanted to see how they tackled this. The permit gave a broad assignment to the permittees. They said, look at your codes and regulations to make LID the preferred approach. And they described that by look ways to minimize impervious surface, native vegetation loss, and stormwater runoff. So that was a broad mandate. The teams that were assembled kind of took on that task to look for opportunities in the code. And it was throughout the code where they examined. And so, other than the prescription requirements in the drainage manual that we don't have leeway on, in terms of the codes, they weren't as prescriptive. So I just wanted to make that clear.
So are we going to have some kind of comparison before too long? Is that?
So that's the question. How do we benchmark with other counties?
The other thing I've learned that's an important tale here is from what I learned from some of the folks in Public Works who administer the drainage manual, some key definitions got left out of the code that would provide increased flexibility. Now, one of those that got left out of the code that's in the drainage manual is for ineffective impervious surface. There's effective impervious surface and ineffective impervious surface. The difference between that is you have impervious surface, but the water runs off via dispersion or infiltration. So functionally, it doesn't represent impervious surface. It doesn't generate runoff. And so the manual allows for assessment of site development to assess what part of that development is effective and what's ineffective impervious surface.
So I just want to jump in there because that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm interested in from my perspective. I mean, if there's a definition that was left out, or we did, we missed dotting an I or crossing a T, and there's a way to create maximum flexibility for the property owner while effectively having no greater detrimental effect of the runoff, then that's something we absolutely should consider. And I also like the idea of the credit, of considering whether the credit system that we use for parcels above 2.5 acres should apply to parcels below 2.5 acres. Those are the things I'm interested in. I'm not really interested in trying to redo the whole system or I mean, it sounds like the 65, 35, 10 scheme and full dispersion is kind of a state. I'd be curious to know how other jurisdictions have handled it, because
I've not heard that.
Because I would imagine that they are, it would be surprising to me if they were wildly different if this is coming from the drainage manual, as you say, from the state, but that'd certainly be interesting to know as well. So those are my direction from my perspective.
Okay, that's mine too. I'm with you. So
Received.
What else do we need?
That's actually really helpful, and so that gives us, we had kind of an idea of where we're headed, but to have a little more focus has been helpful, and so we'll take that back and get back together and focus.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe a follow-up briefing.
Yes,
whenever
certainly.
you're ready. But also it will be helpful to see how the how the implementation of this new regulation, which took effect January 1st, 2017, and we're already 2.5 years into that. I think you're already outlining the challenges on the properties 2.5 acres and below. But I think it would be great to hear, what else is out there from your perspective, from the experience that you have going through the process. What is it that you're hearing from the applicant's point of view? And also, what are the challenges you see in trying to interpret the new regulation? I think it would be great to have a global briefing related to this particular regulation, and maybe come to the point as to what will be the next steps. And the next steps will be, obviously 2.5 acres and below. What type of credits? What will be the approach? What will be the alternatives that you're planning to, from your wisdom, plan to present to Board of County Commissioners in terms of options?
And I just want to throw out before we go that I don't want it to leave the impression that I feel like we should drop to the lowest common denominator. I mean, the commissioners are always talking about, are we the leader? Is Thurston County ahead of the curve? And I want to be ahead of the curve. And maybe we have stronger, given the state of Puget Sound and where we sit in this larger environment, maybe we need to be the leaders in this area. So it's part of the calculus as well. Okay. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but
I think it's part of the balance.
yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Great, thank you.
we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Romero, do you have anything for public testimony follow-up for us?
No, I just want to give you a heads up, and this is not necessarily related to the public testimony, but the public has submitted Mr. Pettit, and perhaps he might be coming this afternoon. He submitted a couple of options to you, is in your inbox, where he's providing some an option related to the courthouse, and this is related to how perhaps the district court functions could be relocated on the FJC site. I'm not ready to outline that particular information provided Mr. Pettit. He submitted that, I believe, yesterday. I think he submitted some maps last week, but he submitted a formal report yesterday. But certainly, I would like to engage the board next Tuesday morning. And more not necessarily related to Mr. Pettit's suggestion, more so, and for you to start thinking about this, is what is it that we're going to do with the many, perhaps other citizens may be providing an opinion, a perspective, as to how all the many different variations as to how the potential courthouse should be implemented. Because all that is going to require time and effort and money to determine whether it's, any ideas provided by the citizen is feasible, is practical, is something you may consider. But so give me some time to take a little more closer look at his proposal, and then I'll engage next Tuesday morning when Commissioner Hutchins is back into the meetings as to how we, or the board, is going to try to manage all the perhaps the many different suggestions by citizens that might be coming your way related to the courthouse project.
Okay. Sir, do you have other stuff? I'm trying to expedite, and
Yeah.
I've got another meeting coming up. So
Okay, I just
go
wanted to
ahead.
ask, it was related to that.
Yes, sir.
Did you guys get I had another communication from Mr. Pettit about courthouse maintenance costs and, okay, everybody got that?
It was, the one that
When
Commissioner
was
Edwards
that?
received was directed to Commissioner Hutchins and Commissioner Edwards.
I got a separate one, I
You must have
think.
gotten a separate
And that's
one.
why I thought
It's
maybe.
related to the same, and I can forward that to Rob.
Yeah,
It basically presents it attaches a study from some engineering firm about the amount of money that should be spent on maintenance of buildings over periods of time. And I didn't get a chance to dissect it, but I think that the argument is that we haven't been up to snuff according to these standards, but something to
I would say we have not been up to stuff according to any standards. We acknowledge that the maintenance on these buildings is lacking, and it's due to lack of funds. So we do our best to hold the buildings together, but we have not invested the amount that any national standard would suggest.
Okay.
I think that's it.
I would not disagree with that, and I think that goes back to the Growth Management Act and the lack of a Phase 2 of the Growth Management Act. Phase 2 was to address the funding that counties would be able to conduct their business with adequate funding. It was never accomplished, and that actually is one of my concerns on the upcoming proposal is we don't have adequate funding to keep track and fund proper maintenance of our existing facility. If we end up with a brand new facility, we don't have funds to maintain that either. So therein lies the problem, in which I think we need some help from the state legislature before we get ahead of ourselves. But that's for a work session somewhere farther down the road.
Did you see the Ruckle House report? It
No,
just
I haven't seen it. Is it out?
Came out
It's
last
out.
week.
Oh, I haven't got it yet. Okay, I'll be looking at that. Thank you very
So I
much.
would also add that I have a meeting scheduled with Mr. Pettit this afternoon at 1:30 to talk about this very issue.
Okay, I
And
wouldn't
would
doubt,
love to see this.
we'll probably hear from Mr. Pettit at 2, I would guess, too. Okay, so that's it for live streaming for our agenda setting. Everybody have a good day. See you back here.